So, all three of your ministers here at First UU Church of Austin were in Portland, Oregon, week before last, including last Sunday, to attend our annual Unitarian Universalist General Assembly. As the first of us to be back in the pulpit, I thought I should start by asking, anything of much significance happen while we were gone? Oh, yeah, the whole Supreme Court legalizing same-sex marriage across the country thing happened. And let me tell you, there was some celebrating going on in Portland, and that was in addition to their annual nude bicycling festival that was happening at the same time. When the news came out, it electrified the atmosphere where thousands of Unitarian Universalists from across the country had gathered for our assembly, and I think rightly so. I think we can rightly claim that though relatively small in number, we have long been strong advocates for LGBT persons, culminating in our Standing on the Side of Love advocacy campaign, which has publicly and vocally supported marriage equality. Love won. We were a part of making it happen, and that is certainly worth celebrating. Once again this year at General Assembly, a theme emerged repeatedly. It was about how storytelling can both help us work for social change and nourish our own spirits. Telling our own stories and hearing the stories of others, sharing our stories can be such a powerful way of reaching across borders and lines of otherness, raising social consciousness, and creating religious experiences. So, in the light of all this, I'd like to shift a little from what I had planned for this Sunday and share with you a part of my own marriage equality story. I got Wayne's permission to do that too. I call it the newest X-Files. Chris and Wayne got married. We've been together 24 years now, and several years back we decided we wanted to get legally married. Back then, only a small handful of states in the U.S. even recognized same-sex marriage. We decided to go to Vancouver, Canada instead because, well, it's a fun place. So I was fairly new to lay leadership here at First UU Church of Austin at the time, and my call to ministry was then a very faint voice only beginning to emerge, or rather re-emerge, but more on that later. Having left the Southern Baptist religion of my childhood far behind and embraced a very rationalistic, science-based worldview, I was at the time struggling with how or even whether I could find a way to redefine and re-embrace terms like God or the divine, even metaphorically. On the Friday we were supposed to start our trip to Canada, Wayne got a call that his sister, whom we have lost since then, was in the hospital with heart failure. After we talked a bit, we decided we would go ahead and go to the airport, not knowing whether we would actually get on the plane or whether we'd have to cancel our trip. Wayne was on and off his cell phone the whole time we were making it to the airport. As we got there, he got a call. She had stabilized. We boarded our plane and started on our journey to get married. Surely nothing could stop us now. We made our connecting flight in Denver, but shortly after taking off for Vancouver, the smell of something electrical burning filled the plane, and it started getting very, very hot in the cabin. The pilot came on the PA system and said we were going to return to Denver due to an electrical malfunction in the air conditioning and heating system. In other words, it was on fire, or at least about to be. A young woman named Tiffany, who was sitting in the seat between us, gave me a very worried look and downed the vodka 7 she had just ordered. And then the pilot came back on and announced that we were going to make an emergency landing in Cheyenne, Wyoming instead. By now, it had gotten so hot in the cabin that a woman near the front of the plane had passed out and fallen into the aisleway. I thought to myself, so this is it. I was right all along. There is no God, and we're never going to get married because we're about to die in a fiery crash in a cornfield in Wyoming. I don't really even know if there are cornfields in Wyoming, but that's the image that popped into my head. We started a very bumpy and very scary descent. Tiffany asked if I would hold her hand, so I did. She squeezed it so hard that the pain temporarily knocked me out of my existential crisis. As we neared the ground, she noticed that her cell phone had a signal, so she let go of my hand and dialed her fiancé. We're making an emergency landing. I think the plane is on fire, and I'm not sure if we're going to make it. I'm living a nightmare. This is Tiffany. Call me later. We landed. The plane was bigger than the hangar at the airport. They pulled up some metal stairs to the exit door and hurried us off of it, asking us to please pick up our rolling luggage as we went past the woman who was still sprawled in the aisleway. It's okay. She was okay. They got her out safely, too. There was a bar in the little tiny airport hangar, and it was still open. There is a great and merciful God, and she provides comfort in our times of great difficulty. Eventually, they gave us our luggage, loaded us in buses, and took us back to Denver, where we would get on a new flight to Vancouver very early the next morning. But now we had a new challenge that we were faced with. The marriage licensing agents in Canada closed at noon on Saturday, so we were going to have to rush to make it to one on time so we could get our paperwork so that the person who was going to marry us on Sunday could sign it and make everything legal. The trip to Vancouver was uneventful, and we rushed through the airport trying to make it through customs, get our luggage and a rental car, and get to the licensing agent on time. We hit customs only to find that there was a large group of rather heavy-set men with gray hair and full gray beards wearing a variety of red and white outfits or T-shirts with Christmas themes. Apparently, we had arrived in Vancouver just in time for the People Who Play Santa Claus Each Christmas annual convention. Most of them were accompanied by plump, rosy-cheeked Mrs. Clauses, one of whom was wearing a T-shirt with red lettering that said, "Biker Chick," while her Santa's shirt asked, "Naughty or nice?" Wayne gave me this look that said, if there is a God or some kind of divine presence in the universe, it has a sick sense of humor. We made it through customs, grabbed our luggage and a rental car, and made it to the licensing location with just barely enough time left. I parked the car, threw a coin in the meter, and we practically sprinted to the place. We got there, we both signed the paperwork where required, and then all that was left was to fill out some of the detailed information and pay the fee. We agreed that Wayne would do that part, and I would go back to the car to make sure there was enough time in the meter so that we could have lunch nearby. I went back outside and walked over to the car. And then unexpectedly, as I was glancing at my watch to see how much time I would need to add to the meter, my eyes suddenly filled with tears. I couldn't stop it. I was so overwhelmed with joy. As we were having lunch later, Wayne started telling me about how he had looked up at the clock as they were finishing the paperwork and realized we were going to make it on time and had said, we're really going to get married, his eyes filling with tears. I asked him what time that had been. It was the exact same moment that I had experienced the exact same thing. Perhaps the divine exists in an interconnectedness that is so much more complex and vast and powerful than we can fully understand. Maybe the divine is what happens when we love each other beyond our ability to express it in words. The next day, in a beautiful historic home on Vancouver Bay, a wonderful woman conducted our marriage service for us. An adorable dog named Marley broke into the room and sat right beside us, our little best man with a squeaky toy in his mouth, which he occasionally chomped down on, causing it to punctuate key elements of the ceremony with a loud squeak followed by lots of laughter. It was perfect and beautiful, and it still fills my soul with an indescribable joy to remember it. I think that Like our struggle to get married, in the larger struggle for marriage equality and indeed any social justice movement, we have to keep at the journey. We have to know that the struggle for justice itself has inherent value. It is worth it, even though sometimes we will lose people along the way. We have to keep going, even when it seems like this world upon which we travel in life is burning and we're not sure we'll ever get to our destination. And sometimes its absurdities in life will throw Santa Claus conventions in our path to slow us down. So too, though, will we find comfort in our connections with each other. We will cry together, and we will laugh together when angels like Marley bring joy into our lives. Yesterday was Independence Day. And it feels like the words in that Declaration of Independence, the values expressed all those years ago, have come one step closer to actually being realized, that all of us are created equal, endowed with certain inalienable rights. Wayne and I, as well as married same-sex couples across the country, are now legally protected in the same way as any other married couple would be. We can't be thrown out of the hospital when one of us gets sick. We now have the same inheritance rights as other married couples. We have the same federal and government benefits. Perhaps more importantly for me, it feels like we have made a giant step forward to being recognized as full citizens, full human beings. And yet, my friends, there is still much to be done. In 28 states, it is still legal to fire someone simply for being gay, lesbian, bisexual, or transgendered. Trans lives and their rights and dignity are still under assault, both figuratively and literally. If Wayne and I were to drive less than an hour in most any direction from here, stop at a restaurant, and while there, publicly display the same affection toward one another that any married heterosexual couple might, we would be putting ourselves in danger. While we've been celebrating the Supreme Court decision on marriage equality, 8 African American churches in the South have been burned down. Police have assaulted and killed more unarmed African Americans, including 2 children run over during a high-speed chase through a residential African American neighborhood. So our work isn't done, and we have to find ways to sustain it. I think our successes with marriage equality contain the seeds of how we might do that. When I was only 5 years old, I told my mom that I was going to be a minister when I grew up. I used to record sermons on this little cassette tape recorder my parents had given me. Later, though, after rejecting the religion of my childhood, I no longer had a context within which to imagine a call to the ministry. I've since realized that the nonprofit and theater work I did most of my adult life was a way of trying to construct a secular ministry of sorts. It wasn't until I found this church and this religion that I was able to rediscover that call. A church and a religion that, unlike the one I had left those many years ago, recognizes the inherent worth and dignity of all people. A church and a religion where a gay man can offer what gifts he may have to its ministry, and those gifts will be accepted in a spirit of love. This church and this religion gave me my calling in life back. Reimagined. This church and this religion gave me God back. And in doing so, it transformed my life. And I want ours to be a faith that is that transformative for so many other people, especially those who still suffer oppressions and need a church that will welcome them with open arms and a great love for all humanity. Folks like a young African American woman I encountered while at General Assembly. Our wonderful youth group had put together an action of immediate witness. This was a call for Unitarian Universalist support of the Black Lives Matter movement. Now, these actions require debate and a vote by the delegates attending the assembly. We had a long and at times painful debate with a group of us standing in solidarity with the youth and the representatives from Black Lives Matter to pass the action of immediate witness worded as they had written it. A number of amendments to the wording had been offered that, in our view at least, would have watered it down to make it more comfortable for white people. In the end, it passed overwhelmingly with only minor amendments. As we stood together chanting Black Lives Matter, I noticed that the young woman was crying. I hadn't really met her, though we'd been standing together in a group of folks throughout the debate, but I put a hand on her shoulder to provide some comfort. She threw both of her arms around me, pulled me into a hug, and holding on to me, started really weeping. I placed an arm around her. She said, "I was so scared that they weren't going to pass it." And suddenly I found myself putting my other arm around her and saying, "I was scared too." And though I hadn't known it until that moment, I had been scared. Afraid because had it not passed, my religion would have so greatly disappointed, so greatly hurt our youth and our allies from the Black Lives Matter. It would have so greatly fallen short of the religion I believe we can be. It would have hurt and disappointed me. I had reached out to minister to her, and instead, by being so authentic with a total stranger, by opening up a space where I could get in touch with my own vulnerability, she had ministered to me. And folks, I think maybe it starts there. Two strangers standing in that great big assembly hall, holding each other and telling each other our truths, our fears, being fully human with each other. I think this is the love that we can cultivate in this church and this religion by sharing our fears, our stories, our fragilities that make us human and let us see each other as human. I think this is the love that then we can carry out into our world and that transforms itself into justice, just as it did with marriage equality and the Standing on the Side of Love campaign. So, may our well-deserved and much-needed celebration also renew our commitment to standing on the side of love for all people. May it rekindle and refuel a burning fire for doing justice. Amen.